Well, hello. Welcome to the Leadership in Aviation podcast. I am so excited to have someone who's become a dear friend to me over the last couple of years of working together on the FAA Women in Aviation Advisory Board. She was probably the first pick for the board because of what she does in her daily life and in her day job. Allison McKay is the CEO of Women in Aviation International. She represents women from all over the world in all stages of their careers and has a vibrant program for young women, girls, in fact, to expose them to aviation at a very early age. Allison, thank you so much for making the time to join us today.
Thank you so much. I think we've been trying to get this on the calendar for so long. I'm happy that our schedules finally collided.
Awesome. Well, I want to start with kind of a little bit of your background, but I want to phrase it in this question, which is, I know that there was pretty fierce competition for this CEO position at Women in Aviation International, and the interview process was kind of rigorous. Which I think was probably appropriate. But what was it about this organization that made you willing to go through that really attracted you to this position in the first place?
So at first, I probably was a very typical female looking for a new job, and I thought, this will never be me, right? I looked at the resume, I looked at the job qualifications. I thought, oh, they're not looking for someone like me. I pushed it off. And then, it finally came to what do I have to lose with applying? And so I applied. I think that this is such an amazing organization that supports women through their entire career life cycle, but also young girls, like you mentioned. I'm trying to get them interested in aviation. And I, through my last job, really found a passion for providing opportunity to those that may not consider themselves someone that could have a career in aviation. So yes, the interviewing process was incredibly rigorous. There were a lot of hoops to jump through. Each hoop that I jumped through, though, made me want the job more. And I think that that was a necessary journey for me to go through to show that I could do it.
I love that. And, that's something that I think is a great lesson for people to think about as they're listening to this podcast, is that sometimes the things for which we struggle or have to work the hardest are the ones that are the most rewarding. And so what have been some of the rewards for you having gone through that process and sitting in this position now for almost 2.5 years?
Yeah. So the thing that is like the biggest struggle for me was public speaking, being out in front of people. And as the face of the organization, that is a big part of my job, is to speak in front of people, get up in front of that big stage and that big audience at conference each year. But honestly, that is where I feel most of the connection with our members and our attendees, and listening to their stories after I do something like that and really connecting with them on a very personal level, even though they really don't know me and I don't really know them. I think that is just so powerful. And I think we inspire each other that way.
Well, I've seen you speak on that stage. I've also seen you speak in public meetings like the ones that we did for the Women in Aviation Advisory Board. And I've seen you speak in front of a camera or in front of Congress members on the Hill. And I would never know that you were nervous about public speaking. You've definitely overcome that fear. And I think that that's a great leadership trait. And I wonder if you have even just a word of advice for younger people who are listening to this on how to overcome some of those fears or even some of that self-doubt. We hear so many people talk about, gosh, I feel like I have imposter syndrome. how do I overcome that?
Yeah.
So what's your advice about that? I'm anxious.
So I am no different than anybody who struggles with that. I think that's just something that everybody feels, that they always compare themselves to somebody else and then they try to measure themselves against the other person. For me, with the public speaking, that came from practice. That came from repetition of doing it over and over. I think it's like trial by fire, especially at conference, right? That first time you get up, the butterflies are there, but by the third day, it's like, hey, back up here, talking to you guys like I'm just like one-on-one. So I think, practicing what makes you uncomfortable provides the comfort. The imposter syndrome, that one is more of a challenge to me because I don't know that that's an easy one to solve, but I do think that it is doing things that provide you discomfort, doing that successfully, and then almost doing a debrief with yourself and saying, this thing that you're afraid of, or this thing that you don't think you can do, look, you did it successfully. Like almost like a little like therapy session with yourself to say, why do you keep thinking you can't do this? Because look, you've proven to yourself time and again that you can do it successfully.
Yeah. Well, the other piece to that is, sometimes we do things, risky things, and we fail.
Yeah.
And the self-talk that I have with myself when I fail at something is, okay, well, that didn't go exactly the way I planned, but here are all the things that could have gone wrong that didn't. And here are the lessons that I can learn and take into my next adventure. And I think it's really important to be willing to say, I'm going to learn from this no matter what. So I'm willing to do this as a learning experience. It doesn't have to be a home run every single time. If we hit a single and we learn something, if we strike out and we learn something, then it's not a loss. And so
100%.
I found that helps overcome imposter syndrome, just changing your mindset.
Yeah. And it is all mindset. I think that we have, and I don't know if it's just women, because I talk to men who feel the same way. We have this internal dialogue that is kind of self-destructive. And if we're not going to be kind to ourselves and talk to ourselves in a positive way, how do we expect other people to do that for us? So I think that's part of it, is learning from things that didn't go well, because everybody has had those. But if you take from that and keep growing and building, it's going to only make you better.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I think that you face some leadership challenges that some of our listeners have never faced and will never face. And I think there are some lessons that we can learn no matter what out of those. Mm-hmm. One is that you lead a very large international organization. So you have time zone challenges, you have language barriers, you have cultural obstacles to overcome. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the challenges are and maybe some of the things that you think are just amazing that have come from managing an international organization?
So I took this role in late February of 2020. And so we all know what happened to the world at the end of March 2020. I had a lot of ideas and expectations as to what the first year of me in this role were going to be, and it involved a lot of travel. And obviously that didn't happen. And we had to really shift the way we did everything as an organization, how we communicated with our members, how we stayed engaged, the programming that we provided, all of that had to change because we were trapped on one of these devices instead of being out and about. And so it provided a much harder entry into this position, especially for our international members. But we really tried to utilize technology to connect. And so if I had thought about the first year when I would be able to travel, right, I would have probably gone to Europe once, I would have gone to the Middle East once, maybe I would have made it to Asia or Australia. And that would have been it once, right? One time in that first year. But with technology, we could set up Zooms every week. And so we had Zooms that started at 5 in the morning Eastern, and we had Zooms that were 6 p.m. in the evening. And so we allowed our members to have that dialogue with each other and with my team more than we would have if we had been traveling. So there were some bright spots to it. And I did get to connect with a ton of our chapters around the world that I probably would have never had the ability to visit with. So that was a huge benefit. And that's something that we're going to carry on now that we are now out and about again.
So would you say, and I know we looked at this in the US, what the barriers are for women in aviation to come into aviation, to stay in aviation, and to be promoted within aviation to the highest levels of leadership. Do you see that the challenges are the same or different around the world?
You know, and honestly, I think that we have the same challenges. Now, culturally, some sections of the world have more of a barrier for women than men, but across the board, I think that access to information about the industry is a struggle worldwide. I think retaining female talent is a problem worldwide. And I think advancing women, if we look at the demographics of women throughout the world, I think there is not a ton of difference country to country. There are some success stories in different countries, but I think every country will admit that we could be doing more to advance and retain women.
Well, one of the other challenges that I know that you have is that you have a lot of volunteers. You have a very large organization, and it is mostly volunteer led. I know that all of your chapter chairs are volunteers, and you operate with a pretty small staff. And of course, with your staff, you can develop key performance indicators, you can do performance reviews, but that becomes a little bit different when you have an army of volunteers. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of that kind of leadership?
Well, for people listening, I'm not maybe sure that everyone realizes that at conference, for example, we utilize hundreds of volunteers over those 3 days. And the coordination alone of all those volunteers can be challenging. But we have the advantage of having an incredibly passionate membership. And these people are tireless supporters of the mission. And so we don't have to worry so much about somebody proactively volunteering to do something and then not stepping up to what they've committed to. And so in that regard, we're very lucky. And we do have the same volunteers return year after year. So you have this confidence and this comfort level with, what we've asked them to do and what they think that they're going to sign up to do. But yeah, it's we have an army of really passionate women and men that believe strongly in the mission of this organization and want to support it any way they can.
Well, I think there's a key in there that a lot of business owners or leaders can really learn from. And I heard you say the word passion a couple of times. And I think that's one thing that's really important in building a good company culture and building a good organizational culture is really being able to communicate what the mission and vision of the organization are. And I think you're exceptionally good as an organization at that. But then developing some core values that everyone lives by. Because I think that one of the things that I know about coming to a Women in Aviation conference is that I'm going to be greeted warmly. I'm going to feel welcome. I'm going to experience being around a lot of youthful energy. And I think that having those core values, and I don't know what your core values of your organization are, but those are the ones that shine through. To me, I think having that common thread through your organization probably ignites your volunteers and delivers that passion that you see. What do you think?
I think coming to our conference, it's a very unique energy and experience. We've all been to industry conferences where you sit in a room and you learn something or you hear someone talk. But this is, to me, I equate it to a family reunion with only family that you love and want to see. And this one, when we returned back in person this year, I think that you saw that more than maybe any other year. It was like this energy, this palpable energy of excitement. The volumes were high, the laughter was high. Everyone was just so happy to be back in person and see each other. Because we are in an industry where we are a significant minority. And so you could be working for an organization and be the only woman or the only woman of your age. And so to come and have this kind of network and support system, I think is really powerful. I remember when I was younger in my career and I was starting to have children, and nobody I had ever worked with or was working with had children. And so for me, the experience was isolating, and I didn't want it to appear that having children was going to affect the way I did my job, my dedication to the job. And so I handled it by trying not to talk about it, right? So to any new boss I had, I didn't want them to know I had children until they had to know I had children. But then a woman came to work in my organization, and she was a little bit older and had a little bit older children than I did. And she was really matter of fact about the balance that she had achieved in her life, what she was willing to tolerate in terms of work-life balance and what she wasn't. And she was just so bold in saying, like, hey, my kid has tennis on Tuesdays at 4, so I'm going to be leaving early and I'll work after tennis is over. In a way that was unapologetic. And I just found that so refreshing and kind of eye-opening for me, because I had handled it so differently. But I think that's what this conference can give you, is these connections that you may not get in your day-to-day work life that are really important.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that we discovered is that so many women don't recognize that they have role models, or they don't have role models. Either they're not looking for them, or they just really have never found one. And I think that's one of the things that Women in Aviation does. And it does it on a very grand scale a couple of times a year with Girls in Aviation Day. Will you talk a little bit about that experience and importantly, how people can get involved with that?
Absolutely. So we do it once at conference for the local kids in whatever city we're in. And then globally at the end of September, usually every year, through either our corporate partners or a chapter network. And we attract girls 8 to 17 is what we say, but an 8-year-old could have a 5-year-old sibling. And so, it's a fluid moving target, but we try to show them all the careers that exist in the industry and all the industry segments that exist, because I think both are very important. And so based on, which event you attend, it could be focused more on space, or focused more on helicopters, or focused more on pilots or maintenance. You'll get a different experience at each Girls in Aviation Day event, which I think is really great. But I don't know who is more excited at these events, the volunteers or the kids, because it is just so moving to get kids excited for something they didn't really consider when they walked in.
So just so our listeners know, how many girls in how many countries participate typically, or what are you looking for?
Okay, so pre-pandemic, we were at about 20,000 girls. And so, we've slowly come back this past year. Probably half of our chapters were able to host in-person events, just because the pandemic was still strong in some parts of the world. But we also, during the pandemic, were able to launch an app, Aviation for Girls app. So, we reached a ton more countries than we would have with in-person events. And I think this year, fingers crossed, everybody is back to in-person events. And my goal is to hit that 20,000 girl mark again, and really keep growing and expanding our reach. And how we put on these events.
I love that. So how many different countries did you have with the app?
Oh gosh. So I think I will have to check on that. I think that we were at 58 countries downloaded the app, and I think we were probably close to 30 countries that did in-person events this past year.
That's an astounding reach, Allison.
And one of my colleagues, she went to St. Martin recently, last week actually, and they had a Girls in Aviation Day event down there, and she just said it was so powerful watching these young girls who really didn't have access to a lot of air travel or time in an airport or interest in the industry, just see them light up.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Now, I know that you and your organization did a study that really showed that what attracts young women to aviation is not the opportunity to put their STEM education to work. What is it that attracts women to aviation?
So we found it's excitement, it's thrill, it's opportunity, it's all of the feelings you get that when you're in this industry that we know so well. But I think that, for better or worse, STEM is in the forefront of government and industry's mind as a very important aspect to keep our country's talent pool strong, which I don't disagree with, but I think that there's a way to engage young girls with the great things that this industry has to offer, while not pushing, you have to be good at science, technology, engineering, and math, because I think that's what disassociates some girls with this industry, is they feel like, oh, I'm not a straight A science or math student, so I couldn't be a pilot, that's very far from the truth.
Well, from a leadership perspective, how do you drive change in that area?
I think it's hands-on exposure. So I think Girls in Aviation Day is a fantastic opportunity for young women. I think some of our other partner organizations do such great things as well to inspire youth. OBAP has their summer camp program, and I know the Smithsonian does as well. And there are so many youth outreach programs. Laura Jones, who was on our advisory board, she has a fantastic program to excite young people about this industry. And I think that if you kind of get them hooked with the passion, like we talked about earlier, then they are willing to really step up to the plate and study and do the things that they need to do to be successful.
So I know that you're managing this organization and you are raising a family. We talked about that. I think they're boys, not girls.
I know, I'm off brand, yes.
But I'm wondering if you can talk about what you do for self-management to make sure that you can keep it all flying.
Yes. So, I'm going to admit I'm not the best at the self-care aspect of keeping myself together. But I think that I enjoy being around my kids and, watching them play sports. Your baseball analogy was great because my kids are heavy into baseball. So I like watching them get so excited for their hobbies and that. But there's nothing better than getting together with your girlfriends for dinner or a drink or, just kind of hanging out and debriefing at the end of a long week. But this is a really fun job, and I'm incredibly lucky. And I think that, I get done with meetings and I'm kind of like so excited, and it's like palpable, like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to like bring this idea to life. I think it's just a fantastic opportunity.
Well, I think you've given us a really good glimpse into why the organization is successful and growing. Of course, you had a foundation upon which to build with a lot of volunteers who have been around for a long time. I'm excited to see where it goes in the future. How can people participate in Girls in Aviation Day? How can they connect with or follow the organization? And how many more people can you get to sign up to be lifetime members?
Oh, I know. Thank you for that, Renee. That was a great gift. Okay, so Girls in Aviation Day. If you go to our website under events, you'll, as we get more close to our September kind of launch, you'll see all of the events listed, and we keep adding them as we find out about them. So that's easy. And our chapters are always looking for volunteers. So if you are local to an event that you see on the website, please reach out to the chapter president. They are obviously, volunteer based, so they need help. We will be at EAA Air Venture in July in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and we will have a booth, and we have a breakfast, and you can register for that on our website under events as well. I would love to see you come by our booth and say hello. And what else? Oh, members. Yes. Lifetime membership has its privileges, and we appreciate the support that our members give us. And, it just helps us do what we want to do and keep growing and expanding what we can offer those in the industry and those that want to get in the industry. Oh, and sorry, our scholarships open July the 1st. So please check out our website on July the 1st if you are looking to, pay for training or expand your knowledge. There's a ton of scholarships available.
Awesome. Very important key thing.
Yes, very important.
Is there anything else I forgot to ask you about that's important to cover today?
No, I think it's just that that I just feel incredibly privileged, one, to have worked with you and the members of the advisory board. I really grow and thrive when I'm around role models myself. And so to have worked with you, 30 fantastic women over the last 2 years, has just set my soul on fire. And I am thankful to have met you and to continue working with you. I think it's just such an honor.
Awesome. Well, Allison McKay, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Look forward to many more conversations.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Renee.